For over 1,000 years, it was the single richest, most incredible city in the world. It was a fortress of Christendom, the capital of a Roman Empire that stretched all the way back to antiquity. But in 1453, all of that came to a sudden, dramatic, and bloody end. So let's dive into the final, fateful days of Constantinople.
Picture this. On that day, a young, ambitious conqueror, Sultan Mehmed II, rides his horse through the smoking, battered streets of the city. The siege is finally over, and as he makes his way to the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in all of Christendom, the body of the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, lies somewhere, lost among the thousands of his dead soldiers at the city gates. With his death, an unbroken line of rule stretching back 2,000 years to Augustus Caesar just ends. So how on earth did it come to this?
Well, to really understand the fall, we have to get one thing straight. By 1453, the mighty Byzantine Empire was really just a shadow of what it once was. Its end wasn't a sudden collapse, more like the final chapter for a giant that had been fading for a very, very long time.
And what's wild about this timeline is just the sheer scale of the decline. I mean, in 1050, this empire was the center of the world. But then a series of absolute disasters hit. They lose huge chunks of territory to the Turks, they get squeezed out by rising powers in Italy, and then, and this is the crucial part, in 1204, the city is brutally sacked by fellow Christians during the Fourth Crusade. That one disaster left it permanently crippled. So by the time our story really begins, the empire was basically just the city itself and not much else.
And this number just perfectly illustrates the situation. 60,000. That's it. This city went from a bustling metropolis of 500,000 people down to a population the size of a small modern town, just rattling around inside these enormous ancient walls. It was poor, parts of it were literally abandoned, and it was completely surrounded by a new rising power. So this huge disparity really sets the stage for a classic underdog story. You've got this confrontation between a dying empire and a young, hungry one. It is a true David and Goliath showdown.
So, on one side, you have Emperor Constantine XI, who's ruling this tiny, isolated city-state that's just plagued by internal arguments about religion. And on the other side, you've got the young Sultan Mehmed II. He's a brilliant guy, totally fascinated by Alexander the Great, and absolutely obsessed with one single goal: conquering Constantinople and making it the heart of his own New World empire. And his domain? It already stretched from Europe all the way to the Middle East, completely surrounding the city.
And just look at the military numbers. I mean, it is just staggering. Constantine somehow managed to scrape together about 17,000 men. It was a mix of his last Roman soldiers, some local recruits, and a bunch of mercenaries and volunteers from all over Europe. Facing them was Mehmed's colossal force of nearly 160,000, including his elite janissaries, cavalry, and thousands of professional soldiers. The odds were just insane.
So with odds that overwhelming, Mehmed didn't just show up and start fighting. No, his preparations were careful, they were strategic, and honestly, they were designed to be terrifying. He was not leaving anything to chance.
His biggest advantage was a new kind of superweapon. A Hungarian engineer named Orban built him this monstrous cannon, one of the largest the world had ever seen. This thing was so huge it took hundreds of men and teams of oxen just to drag it into position. And it was designed to do one thing and one thing only: turn thousand-year-old medieval stone walls into rubble.
But before he even fired a single shot, Mehmed made this absolutely brilliant strategic move. He built a massive fortress, Rum el-Hisari, right on the European side of the Bosphorus Strait. This basically put a chokehold on the city's lifeline to the Black Sea, cutting off all their trade and any hope of help from the north. This one move proved to everybody in Christendom that this siege, this time, was the real deal.
Now, despite all that, the defenders put their faith in their legendary defenses. The Theodosian walls were a true marvel of engineering. They had stood for 1,000 years and had successfully repelled 22 other sieges. It was a triple-layered defense system. First, you had to get across a huge 60-foot-wide moat. Then you faced a low but strong outer wall. And even if you got past that, you were staring up at the magnificent 40-foot-height inner wall, which was studded with towers that were basically small castles. They seemed unbreakable.
And so, on April 7th, 1453, the Great Siege began. For the next 59 days, the city would have to endure this relentless storm of fire and steel. It was a test of the walls and of the courage of the people inside.
And you know what? For weeks, the impossible actually seemed possible.
The huge cannons would batter the walls all day, but every single night, the soldiers and the citizens would work like mad to repair the damage. The heavily armored defenders, along with these highly skilled Genoese crossbowmen and Cretan archers, they beat back every single assault, turning the moat into a bloody killing ground.
So here's the crucial strategic problem. The land walls, though they were getting smashed up, they were holding. But the city's sea walls along the main harbor, called the Golden Horn, they were much weaker. The issue for Mehmed, though, was that the defenders had blocked the entrance to the harbor with a gigantic iron chain. It was impossible for his navy to get in. So, how do you get past it?
You don't. You go around. In what has to be one of the most audacious and brilliant moves in all of military history, Mehmed ordered his engineers to build a road of greased logs over the hill of Galata. In a single night, his men dragged 25 of their warships overland and dropped them directly into the enemy's harbor, completely bypassing the chain. This was a masterstroke, and it forced the defenders to spread their already tiny army even thinner.
The pressure just kept mounting, and then finally, on the night of the final all-out assault, two disastrous things happened at almost the same time. The commander of the professional mercenaries, a Genoese captain named Giustiniani, was badly wounded. Exhausted and panicking, he abandoned his post on the wall, and his men followed him. At that exact same moment, someone discovered a small gate, a paterna, had been left unlocked and unsecured.
A small group of Ottoman soldiers slipped through, and soon the cry of terror that everyone had been dreading for 2 months echoed along the walls. The Turks are inside. The psychological blow was just devastating. The defensive lines wavered, and then they completely broke. After 59 days, the elite Janissaries poured through the breaches, and the unbreakable city was finally, tragically broken.
The fall of the walls, well, that marked the end of the battle. But it also signaled the end of an entire era. The world as people knew it was about to change forever.
In the midst of all that chaos, Emperor Constantine XI reportedly tore off his imperial symbols, declaring that he would not outlive his empire. He and his most loyal men then plunged directly into the thickest of the fighting near the gate of St. Romanus and died a soldier's death. The last Caesar fell defending his city.
And this is where the story really pivots in a fascinating way. See, Mehmed didn't just see himself as a conqueror, he saw himself as a successor. He took on the title Caesari Rum, which means Caesar of the Romans. In his mind, this wasn't just a conquest, it was a transfer of power. The Ottoman Empire was now the new Rome.
The fall of Constantinople sent absolute shockwaves across the entire world. For a lot of historians, this event marks the true end of the Middle Ages. It solidified the Ottoman Empire as a dominant global power and shifted the entire center of gravity of the world for centuries to come. And so it leaves us with one final big question. With the Second Rome now gone, what other power would rise up to claim its legacy and shape the coming modern world?